you so much for joining Jack and I this morning. We really appreciate it.
Of course. Thank you for having me, and thank you for
Absolutely.
being the lone voice of rational media in Ohio. As you know, the rest of the Ohio media can be summed up as the committee to re-elect Sherrod Brown. So thank you for doing what you're doing.
Well, I think it's important to have voices out there so that we can elevate your stance. We have 18 days to the election, maybe less. And as we look at what's at stake today, many people are early voting. I really want to figure out, as a woman, what candidate supports women more. So let's get into this, Bernie. I want to talk about the economy. Mainstream media will have you believe women voters only care about one issue, like abortion. But I can tell you that narrative really doesn't capture reality. As a female voter, we participate in over 59% when we're coming to that ballot. So I know that there's multiple issues that we're driven by, like the economy, border security, healthcare, even world peace, given what's happening today as I look at the world stage. When I vote, I'm looking for the best candidate in this Senate race who's going to be on my side. Today, I'm feeding two kids under two in a household, paying bills, juggling multiple tasks. What can you accomplish in the Senate to make the lives of women like mine better?
Well, the first thing you got to know about me, Mehek, is that I was raised by an incredible mom. She had seven kids, came to America, restarted her life while raising seven kids. Think about that for a second. You got two, imagine seven. While raising seven kids, she started a successful business, grew it into a really successful business, but then always took care of us, always made sure she was present, whether it was coming to school meetings or whatever the case may be. She really was a miraculous person. It's sad for me that she's not here today. She passed away a little over 2 years ago. I think she'd be proud that her son, who was born in Colombia, South America, could even aspire to be a senator in the United States of America. I think that's why she left a comfortable life behind in Colombia to come here, because this is a place of unlimited opportunity and unlimited potential. So that's number one. Number two, you got to know that the most important person in my life today is my wife, Bridget. We've been married for 35 years. We met freshman year in college, got engaged junior year, got married 3 weeks out of school. We have four great kids, two girls and two boys, three grandkids, two of them are girls. Look, at the end of the day, Mehek, here's the reality. We have a candidate on the other side who is totally disrespectful of women. If you look at his history, I'm not going to go into that. You can Google that yourself. But on top of that, he's for having men play in women's sports. Now, come on, Mehek. That's not what Ohio values are. He's also for giving sex reassignment surgeries to children. How about if we just agree we leave our children alone? They're not old enough to consent. So that's the reality of what it is. And on top of that, I respect women enough to know that they care about a lot of issues, whether it's the price of food, the price of going out, the grocery store, the price of gas, the price of insurance, what they're seeing in every day of their life. Hard to keep up, hard to make ends meet, interest rates that continue to climb. They also care, like you said, about what's going on all over the world. Look, with President Trump, we had 4 years of peace and stability. I can tell you my wife's number one issue is that her 26-year-old son were to get drafted to have to go to the military to fight an unjust war with no end in sight that would cost this country trillions of dollars. They're worried about the border. Fentanyl is pouring across our border, and what does my opponent say? It's a right-wing conspiracy theory. Jack, when have you heard that before? So those are the issues before us in this election, on top of the fact that when Sherrod Brown went to Washington, D.C. after 20 years in state government, 30 years ago, the deficit was $3 trillion. Now it's approaching $36 trillion. I can tell you a lot of women and men care about those issues. So that's what we're going to talk about. That's what we're going to make this campaign's focus on.
Mr. Moreno, you mentioned prices. Kamala Harris has doubled down on food price controls. Senator Brown is a fan of shrinkflation legislation, essentially bills to punish grocers who, by the way, have a profit margin of about 1 to 3%. That's assuming there wasn't compound inflation over the past few years, which probably wiped those margins away. Now, a majority of Americans don't support price controls, but the country is split. What's your position on price controls? And what would you say to moms thinking about the nearing holidays, buying gifts, having big family dinners, maybe traveling to see members of their family? Is there relief in sight for them? If you're in the U.S. Senate, What will you do to bring prices down?
Well, we had low prices, Jack. We had 4 years of low inflation, average of 1.9%. It was Joe Biden and Kamala Harris with Sherrod Brown's full support that unleashed this incredible inflation that we're seeing. Multi-trillion dollar bills like the American Rescue Plan that bailed out New York and California and Massachusetts, to the Inflation Reduction Act, which, by the way, stripped money out of Medicare to subsidize electric vehicle purchases. That plus an assault on American energy. Sherrod Brown just yesterday there was a newspaper article about how he wants to shut down one of our strongest coal-fired plants that produces 11% of the electricity for Ohio. That's insane. Look, China's building new coal plants every single week. We're dismantling ours. We have to be absolutely dominant in energy. That's going to lower prices. We're going to stop paying people not to work. We have to have a regulatory environment that doesn't choke businesses. We have to have a tax environment that encourages growth. We have to have good schools so we have a great workforce for our companies. And the reality is, one of the things that I can do, Jack, uniquely versus my opponent, I'm going to go out and talk to CEOs. I'm going to tell them about why they should come to Ohio and invest here. When Sherrod Brown even bothers to meet with the CEO, it's probably because that plant is closing. He literally is the grim reaper of manufacturing here in this state. 200,000 manufacturing jobs lost under his watch. That kind of failure in the private sector would have resulted in him being fired long ago. So we're going to drive prices down. We're going to make certain that people can afford to live here in America, just a normal existence. I met a couple not too long ago that talked about that for 40 years. For 40 years, Jack, they used to have steak dinner on Friday nights. Not go out to a steak restaurant, just bought steak and brought it home and cooked it. It was their way of saying, it's Friday, let's have steak. They can't do that anymore because it's too expensive. And yet, what does Sherrod Brown advocate for? Giving money to illegals, feeding them, giving them free health care, billions of dollars to other countries. That's what's broken in our politics. All that has to happen in Washington, D.C. is people who say, you know what, my job is to put the interest of the American people above all else. That's what I'll do.
Well, thank you for that, Bernie, because that was my other question. Look, as many women and mothers, and look, every Ohioan is thinking about this illegal immigration crisis. Every state is a border state. We have over 11 million unvetted illegal immigrants. And I say 11 million, we really don't know the number, given that Custom Border Patrol is no longer checking identification. That came from the Department of Homeland Security. We know that there's 99 known terrorists. Just last week, we were told of one Afghani national that was going to commit a terrorist attack on our election day. So we're looking at what's happening in our country today, what's happening in Ohio. I'm worried about this high risk environment for my children and the safety and security. I can only imagine and do so much as a mother. I can protect them when they're at home. What can you directly do for the safety of my children and so many other Ohioans?
Well, we're going to secure our border, Mehek. We're going to get operational control of the border of this country, which we do not have today, which is an insane situation. We're going to deport anybody who's in this country illegally immediately. My opponent wants to give them citizenship, Mehek. He voted against a bill that wants to count, that refused to only count American citizens when deciding how many congressional seats we have. He's going to vote against the SAVE Act, which says only American citizens can vote in our elections. This is total lunacy. This is not the Democrat Party I understood. This is a Democrat Party that's gone. Most Democrats have now joined the Republican Party. These are lunatic, progressive activists on the other side. Look, we got to get safety and security back. And the other thing we're going to do is make certain that we punish cities that refuse to follow the law. Punish cities that don't support their law enforcement. You look at where my son lives in Delaware County, literally across the street is Franklin County. Franklin County, criminals run wild. In Delaware County, criminals get punished. What's the result? In Franklin County, you have rampant crime. In Delaware County, you don't. We're going to fix Franklin County. Franklin County residents deserve to live in a safe community, and I'm going to advocate for them. But these Democrat-controlled cities, these Democrat-controlled counties, like Cuyahoga, like Cleveland, like Franklin, like Columbus, we're going to fix them. So if you're in either one of those two counties, just know this. In the United States Senate, you're going to have an advocate for you to make certain that you can live in an affordable home, in a safe community with a good school. The other side can't say that because they haven't done it, Mehek. They've been in power in these counties, in these cities for far too long. We're going to fix that.
Senator Brown called President Trump's border wall a vanity project. As you likely know, in 2019, he opposed $300 million that would have gone to the border to detect narcotics and opioids. 500 million again in 2022. You already mentioned earlier this year he wants to count illegals in the census, which, by the way, seems to incentivize illegals in states so that their congressional representative number goes up, their electoral college vote number goes up. Those are just a handful of facts about Brown's border policy. So, a two-part question, because you just said that you want to do what he opposed in 2019, by the way, which was deporting illegal immigrants who have criminal records. He stood in support of that 2019 end mass deportation bill. What I'm hearing you say is that you want to make sure that illegals who are here with criminal records are deported. So I guess two-part question. Is his campaign slogan that he's tough on the border, is that phony baloney? And then in addition to deporting people who are here that have criminal records, are you in favor of mass change to our border policies and laws and programs here in the United States?
Well, let me just say this at the offset. Everything about Sherrod Brown is fake. The guy grew up very wealthy, was a full-pay student at Yale, majored in Russian studies. He puts on the wrinkled suit and the messy hair. That's all an act. Look, this guy's as phony as can be. I've been around a lot of phony people in my business career. I've never seen somebody as phony as Sherrod Brown. Total, complete phony. Look, here's the reality. He's weak on the border. He's part of the progressive movement that wants to open our borders to the rest of the world. Now, he's not brave enough to actually tell people that that's his position, so he lies. Look, that's why the Border Agents Patrol Union endorsed me, not him. How many times have you seen a Democrat not get endorsed by a union and endorse the Republican opponent? They have in my case. I'm very proud of that. In terms of deportations, it's very simple, Jack. It's very simple. If you're in this country illegally, whether you commit a crime or not, by the way, being here illegally is a crime. So if you entered this country illegally, you're here without permission of the United States government, you will be deported. If you're here under temporary protective status, that temporary status will expire, and at that point, you must leave the United States of America. We're only going to allow people that come here under our terms, that are invited to come here, that learn the language, learn the culture, add to our economy, do not take government benefits, and most importantly, assimilate. We want people playing for the American League, not for their own national league. That's really important. By the way, it's what every other country on earth does, Jack, because it's common sense. America's always going to defend our borders. That's what we're going to do. And we're going to take it one step further. We're going to wipe out the Mexican drug cartels with the help of the Mexican government. They're going to help us do that. And we're going to make certain that China understands they send one drop of base chemicals into this country, they'll see their products tariffed so much that their industry will be crippled. That's what we're going to do, because that's what smart people do. Stupid people allow 12 million people to come into this country legally in 3.5 years and then claim that they're the ones stopping it. Look, Ohio voters are very smart. Sherrod Brown thinks they're stupid. I know they're not, because I travel the entire state. We're going to win this election because they know Sherrod Brown is a complete and utter phony.
Well, I'm looking at Sherrod Brown's record in terms of working against us. You brought up girls' sports and playing for the American League. Let's talk about the Girls' League. I'm a mother of a young daughter. I'm also a sports agent. It is critical that we ensure that we're saving girls' sports, because if we don't, this is going to infiltrate every single sector of our lives. Sherrod Brown voted to allow biological transgender males to play and compete in girls' sports. What is your stance on that, Bernie? And I have to ask, will you lead that charge when you win in the Senate to make sure that you are protecting not only Ohio girls, but girls across the United States?
Absolutely. We're going to make certain Title IX says it clear, loudly and proudly. Men playing men's sports, women playing women's sports. Jack, I know how much you love your daughter. She means everything to you. I've seen it, the way you look at her, the way she looks at you. It reminds me of how I look at my children. My head, I'm sure for you, it's exactly the same way. I was with Riley Gaines about a month ago. Imagine what it would be like to be a dad, where you have a daughter with enormous God-given talent, just unbelievable. And for the moment, she's a little girl. So she grows up wanting to be an Olympian, struggles her whole life. I mean, the amount of dedication and effort that you have to put into that sport, this is all consuming. She gets to the largest stage on earth. Can you imagine what that would feel like as a dad or a mom to watch your child there? And then what happens? She has to compete against a man, a 6'4" man in swimming, and then actually ties him. They tied, and they give the trophy to him instead of her. Imagine, Jack, what you would feel in that moment as a dad, how you just saw an organization crush your daughter's dreams because of some obscene social movement that has no basis in reality. That's what we have to stop. Look, if we can't agree on that, then we're in big trouble as a country, Jack. And look, we got to get past these ridiculous issues. The same situation with children. You don't allow children to be mutilated. They can't even get a tattoo, for God's sakes. Now, I'm all for what adults want to do. Adults can do whatever they want, but leave the children alone. And we're going to make certain that that's a national movement, because we are off kilter if we're still arguing about that in 2 years.
You know, one of the misnomers when we talk about these topics is the folks on the left who often talk about trans care. They say, well, you fail to acknowledge that trans people exist. I don't think that's the case. Is it important for us as a country to move ahead with standards of care that actually acknowledge that there is gender identity confusion, or treating kids appropriately without putting them on puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, and cutting off healthy body parts?
Well, look, I have two young girls. I had two young girls that I raised. They're now two amazing adults. Like I said, two grandbabies that are beautiful girls. There's lots of problems that occur during adolescence, and we have mental health resources for that purpose. And when somebody's 18 years old, they have the ability to consent. They have the ability to decide for themselves what they want to do, and I'm all for allowing adults to do whatever they want to do. But children cannot consent by definition, Jack. They're not able to be the age of consent. So how would you give somebody permanent life-altering treatments when they're unable to consent? That isn't something that should even be discussed. It's grotesque. It needs to stop. And we need to invest instead of in mental health resources and understand where this is coming from and nip the problem in the bud. The best example I can give you is this, Jack. There's a lot of young girls, a lot of them, that suffer with eating disorders. They look at social media and these crazy filters that are put out there that make young girls very susceptible to self-image problems. If you have a girl that weighs 90, 95 pounds but thinks for some reason that she's fat, do you give that girl liposuction, Jack? Or do you provide her the mental health resources that she deserves to have so she can live a healthy, happy life? That's not even close. It's the same situation. Again, we shouldn't be arguing about this. Leave children alone. Let them grow up in healthy environments. And if they need treatment, mental health treatment, let's make certain that it's available. Let's give them the support that they need. Let's make certain that we rein in these social media companies that are targeting young children and making certain that they bear that responsibility. Those are the things that we can have consensus on. That's what we have to move this country forward in a debate in an intelligent way.
Well, Bernie, you're talking a lot about common sense versus radicalism, because I truly believe the Democrat Party today isn't the Democrat Party that we saw 10 years ago or 20 years ago. There's a lot of good people in the middle. And when I look at women voters, one of the issues, there is no doubt, is abortion and healthcare access. There's a lot of fear mongering and a lot of misinformation. Ohio voters were very clear on issue one and ensuring that a woman has the right to choose on abortion. Do you think all women care about this issue? And then what is your stance on abortion?
Well, I think everybody cares about this issue, Mehek. And let me just say off the offset, one of the things that's missing in this conversation is that an abortion has got to be probably the worst day in that woman's life. And I think one of the things that we don't do enough when we talk about this issue is have the empathy to understand what that woman's going through. We talk about it clinically. as if it's just, a routine situation. It's not. I obviously cannot give birth, although maybe some on the extreme left think that I can. I assure you I cannot. However, it must be a terrible situation. Look, my wife had a miscarriage before we had our first child. It's brutal. The worst thing you can do, the amateur move, as they say, is tell all your family and friends that you're pregnant, and then, of course, you have a miscarriage, and everybody for the next few months asks you when you're due. It's terrible. It was a terrible situation for my wife. I can't even imagine what a woman goes through to make that decision to get to an abortion. So with that said, let me just say this. I'm pro-life. I believe that all life is sacred. I'm a practicing Catholic person of deep faith, and I'm not going to apologize for my beliefs, even though the radical left wants me to. I will not do that. I'm allowed in this country to have my private, personal religious beliefs, and I will never apologize for them. And I find it grotesque that you have people like Gretchen Whitmer, who's a big supporter of my opponent, that mocks Catholicism. I think that's gross. It's wrong. Now, in terms of what I'll do as a United States Senator, is I support the idea that this primarily should be handled at the state level. The reason for that, Mehek, is very simple. This is a big, broad, diverse country. And for us to have one rule around the entire country that dictates to every citizen of every state is just too difficult when you have a very much divided populace on this topic. So let's let state voters in each state decide. That's number one. Number two, what are some things that we can agree on? Can we agree that adoption should be much less expensive and much easier? I was with a company yesterday. They provide free adoption services for their employees. That's fantastic. Let's make certain that women have access to good health care. Let's make certain that women have equal access to contraception. They don't today. A man can go get contraception and a pack of cigarettes and a pack of gum. That's not what women can do. They have to go to the doctor. It's much more cumbersome. Let's equalize access to contraception. Let's make certain we fund pregnancy centers that do great work for women while they're pregnant and afterwards, helping and supporting that child. Those are the things that we can agree on, that we have broad consensus on. Now, what I've talked about is that aspirationally, something that we should look at in the future is, can we get to a point where we don't have elective late-term abortions at 30 weeks, 35 weeks, where the mom is healthy and the baby's healthy? I think we can all agree that that needs to be something that we got to look at to eliminate those late-term elective abortions. That's my stance. That's what I'll vote for. That's what I believe is good public policy. The idea that we're going to ban abortion nationally is just false. There's no votes, by the way, to do this on either side of the conversation. So any politician that tells you otherwise is just lying to you or trying to just piss you off to get votes. I'm a big believer that we need to stop that. Now, what's my opponent's position? You won't know in a public debate because he's too much of a coward to debate me. But here's what his record is. He voted for partial birth abortions, the most gruesome abortion possible. Most people don't agree with that. He's voted to have federal funding for abortion, something that for decades this country agreed not to do. And he voted against the Infant Born Alive Protection Act, which says in a botched late-term abortion, I don't even like to say this, by the way, in a botched late-term abortion, where the baby's actually born alive, the doctor's not allowed to give that baby life-saving care. In Sherrod Brown's world, that baby is to die in a cold metal table. That has nothing to do with healthcare. That has nothing to do with pro-choice. That's infanticide. It's grotesque. And the only country on earth that would allow something like that is Sherrod Brown's America, Russia, China, and North Korea. I don't think we want to be in that club. I think we got to have a culture in this country that values life, that supports families, and that's what I'm going to do in the United States Senate.
Mr. Moreno, you took the bat out of my hands there, and I'm glad you did. My next question was going to be about your opponent and his support of partial birth abortion. And you hit that straight on. You answered where you are in that position. So let me just ask this, and it can be brief. But what I often hear from pro-abortion women and men is that partial birth abortion isn't a thing. These things don't happen. Why do they say that? I mean, if it's not a thing, why did Sherrod Brown support it? I want to give you a little bit of space there to deal with that, because that's a lot of what the arguments surround in the public domain.
Well, Jack, because they lie. Look, they can't run on their record. They can't run on their policies. They can't run on their positions. They just lie. They go out there, and whether it's about fracking or abortion or any other issue, they just lie. It's the only tool they have in their toolbox. Because if they were ever to actually run on their record and their voting record and their philosophy, they would lose 70-30. You're seeing that at the national level with Kamala Harris. The reality is, look, President Trump's actually a moderate. From Republican ideological perspectives, he's right in the middle, which is where the country needs to be governed from. We can't govern the country from the extremes. Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, and Sherrod Brown want to govern the entire country from the extreme. They want San Francisco policies to go throughout the entire United States of America. This is why we live in Ohio. We don't want San Francisco policies in Ohio. We have different priorities, and we have different ideas around how we should live our lives here in Ohio. I don't care what people in San Francisco decide to do, what they want to teach their children. What I do care about is what happens here in my home state of Ohio. And we're going to make certain that we have somebody in the United States Senate that respects Ohio values. Look, I'll give you one example, Jack. There's 88 counties in Ohio. Sherrod Brown only shows up in about 7 or 8 of them. In about 80 of them, he loses 70, 80, 90% of the vote, doesn't even show up. Look, I'm going to show up in every corner of Ohio. I'll probably lose a vote in Cleveland and in Columbus and in Cincinnati, but you know what? I'm going to show up every single time I can to go out there and make the people in Cleveland's lives better, because I'm going to represent the entire state. He doesn't, he hasn't, and that's what's going to change in January of 2025. If your viewers and your listeners give me the opportunity to serve them, if you honor me with your vote, I will never let you down. I will always advocate for Ohio, and I'll always understand that you're the boss and I'm the employee. That's the difference between me and Sherrod Brown. He thinks he's better than you are. I know I'm not, and I know that I'm going to work hard every day to make certain that I don't disappoint you, don't let you down, and work my tail off for you.
Bernie, thank you. I think one of the hardest conversations, and I as a woman, I will tell you, and I'm going to go back to what you said about Bridget, is having a miscarriage. So thank you for being vulnerable enough to share that. I went through a situation where I thought I was having a miscarriage almost 5 to 6 months in my pregnancy. It's the scariest, most terrifying situation. But I'll tell you, I walked in and received the best care, because that's what Ohio women deserve. Doctors, nurses who won't turn their backs on us, and people who are empathetic during a situation that is the scariest situation in my lifetime. So thank you for sharing that. I think more and more women genuinely need to hear that you're going to be a champion for us, because we don't know what tomorrow holds, but we need to make sure we have a fighter in Washington that is going to preserve our moral compass. And when I look at the world stage, one of the things you actually talked about in the beginning was that Bridget, this is about Bridget now, I got to bring it back home to Bridget. You said that she was really worried about peace. Talk to me a little bit about world peace and what that means to you, your family, and not only that, what it's going to mean when you go to Washington. Because what I have seen on the record from Sherrod Brown as of March of this past year, this is what he said. Instead of showing leadership, Sherrod Brown turned his back on Israel. He equated Israel with Hamas, saying he didn't trust Israel to abide by a ceasefire. Those types of direct threats and comments, I truly believe, are taking away our safety. How do you feel about that? And again, you brought up Bridget, so tell me from her lens, what are those statements doing in terms of fear?
Well, let me just get this out of the offset. I'm Catholic. My wife is Episcopalian, but we're ardent supporters of Israel and the people of Israel and the Jewish people. What they're going through is horrendous. We were just there in July. The country's scared. They've been hurt pretty hard. It's a small country. They know people who've died. It's not something they read about in the paper. It's where they go and actually go to services for soldiers that have died. Sherrod Brown and Kamala Harris were calling for a ceasefire on October 7th as Jews were getting slaughtered by Hamas. Look, American foreign policy has been a mess for decades with Israel. Here's what we're going to do. If we take office, here's the foreign policy of the United States of America with Israel from my perspective. We're going to invest and support Israel. We're going to make certain that the country that's governed by a great government with great people with a phenomenal functioning democracy makes their own decisions on how to execute their military strategy. We're not going to micromanage them. We're going to support them and have their back. We've seen that, what that looks like over the last 30 days, and what they've effectively wiped out the entire leadership of Hamas. They've effectively wiped out the leadership of Hezbollah, and now we're going to see them wipe out the leadership of Iran, and America is going to be there to have their back, because that's what America's responsibility is there, because Israel's fighting the war that we would otherwise fight. You know, these terrorists call Israel the little Satan, we're the big Satan. And that God bless the soldiers of Israel, which I've met, amazing young people that are doing yeoman's efforts. Let's support them and not stab them in the back or kneecap them like Sherrod Brown does. Now, why does he do that? Because he has to pander to his pro-Hamas, pro-terrorist base that has been indoctrinated in our colleges and universities, which we're also going to fix. And our role as the leader of the world, Mehek, is to ensure stability and peace. And when it comes to Ukraine, Sherrod Brown wants to give hundreds of billions of dollars of American taxpayer dollars to have more deaths, more killing. Look, 1 million people in 2.5 years have been killed or injured in the Russia-Ukraine war. It did not happen under President Trump because we projected strength. We're going to end that conflict, stop the killing, and make sure we have peace and stability around the world. Look, we're about peace through strength. They're about war through weakness. That's the contrast. That's the contrast in this election, and that's what we're going to make certain that happens. Look, here's my closing argument to the people of Ohio. It's very simple. Sherrod Brown's been in office for 50 years, 30 of those years in Washington, D.C. Is your life better? Is our debt lower? No, it's 12 times higher. Do we have more manufacturing and opportunities here in Ohio? No, we have 200,000 less manufacturing jobs. Prices are higher. Our borders out of control. We have a mess all over the world. The reason is because he goes down there for a job, for a paycheck. I've been blessed by this country. This country welcomed me and gave me all the opportunity in the world to succeed. I'll never forget that. It's why I'm running. If you vote for me, for Bernie Moreno for the United States Senate, I'll go to Washington, D.C. and always, always advocate for you with a key promise. After 12 years, 2 terms, I'm coming home.
Mr. Moreno, I know you have a lot on your calendar, 2.5 weeks out from Election Day. I just want to say thank you for carving out time to be with us today. It means a lot. Thank you.
Of course, and look, if I win, Jack, if you still have me on, I'd be happy to be with you on a regular basis.
Wonderful. I look forward to that.
Thank you, Bernie. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, guys.